Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seaview Quantum Network. I'm your presenter, Daniel, and I'm here with producer Claudia Pareco. Our opening song features Sunset Serenade by Cyclone. Albums and singles are available in all music stores and platforms. A moment of your time is one of the most extraordinary gifts we could ever be given. Each week, we create a place for you to rest your heart by providing the platform for peaceable connection to the most gifted lightworkers, intuitives, alternative healers who will surprise you with something different, something outside of what's expected, innovative and unique. Our shows are held on Fridays at 12 p.m. Eastern U.S. time and 9 a.m. Pacific time. At any moment to participate on our shows, please call 805-830-8344 and press 1 to talk with the host. Take My Call. At any moment before or during the show, you can opt for Take My Call and jump the long line of callers. We are now following the pay what you can business model. You pay what you feel our services are worth to you. You can send a payment using paypal.me/PURECO and add the amount that you want. To request a show, please write to Claudia Pareco at cview1111@gmail.com or visit our website, cview1111.net. Now, close your eyes and get in touch with the present, the only reality. Feel your body, feel your breath, and let it drift back to the present moment.
Thank you, Danny, and welcome everybody to Seaview. Today, we present the next chapter on the study group podcast, Death and Life in the Other Side, based on the book Messages From Metatron, a course in self-transformation by Devi Nina Bingham. So, welcome to today's show. In this momentous gathering, we delve into a topic that is both profound and transformative, the nature of death and the wondrous realm that awaits us beyond. It is only natural, Metatron says, in understanding of our human nature, to grieve when someone dear to us departs. Yet, let us remember that our grief is for ourselves, for our own loss. For when we transverse to the other side, we discover a realm of unparalleled beauty and vitality, where our spirits soar higher than ever before. The mind, bound by its finite understanding, perceives death as the end, failing to comprehend the eternity that awaits. But dear friends, you are more than a mere body. And Devi Nina Bingham, she's going to explore this with us, with research, with understanding, and with much to know in today's episode. We invite you to see beyond the veils of illusion and discover the truth of your existence. So now, join us in welcoming the author of the book, our friend Nina, to the show. And remember that you can purchase the book. You can email Nina if you want to get an e-copy, a free e-copy of the book. Or you can go to our website, cview1111.net, and go to Devi Nina's page. And you will see the link there where you can enter your information so she can send you a free ebook copy. So you can continue listening to our shows every month as we cover the following chapters of the book. So Again, let's bring Devi Nina Bingham. Oh, before, do you know our host of the show is soon to be a publisher, the owner of a publishing company where authors like you might get the help you need to publish, to self-publish, or whatever book advice you need. So let's bring Nina so she can explain us a little bit more about the endeavors and also to cover today's show in detail. Thanks you, Nina, for being here with us.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Claudia. That was a beautiful introduction. Next year in 2024, not right now, but next year, I will be offering publishing services because by that time, I'll have graduated with my Master's of Humanities in Creative Writing, I'm in that program, finishing that up right now. So I'm very excited to offer my publishing services to everybody next year. If you're an author and you do have a book that you're working on, or you have a book that's spiritual in nature maybe, and you would like me to take a look at it, I would be happy to do that. So just go to my website or my blog. My blog is ninabingham.blogspot.com. And you can email it to me, and, we'll have a conversation about what's possible for your book. Okay, so welcome everybody to our broadcast. And today's show is going to be awe-inspiring. We've had lots of beautiful, wonderful shows, but today's show is special. And it's special because we're going to learn what awaits us after death on the other side. And this information is coming directly from the channeled book, Messages From Metatron, A Course in Self-Transformation. And if you aren't changed after hearing this information, then there's really no hope for you. Because today we're going to be investigating death and life on the other side. Very inspiring. So before I dive into our subject matter, I need to tell you, though, the fine print. The fine print. And you know what the fine print is, Claudia. The fine print is, when you get married, you have to fill out that license, right? That's the fine print when you're getting married. Tells you what your responsibilities and obligations are, right, in marriage. And then you stand up there before the minister, and the minister or priest tells you the fine print again, right? He says you can't date anybody else now. So in any negotiation or agreement that you make, the fine print can make or break you. So I want your full attention as I explain from what spiritual perspective this information comes from. What I mean is, am I going to be explaining these metaphysical concepts from a certain religious perspective? Because I'm sure that you're aware that different religious groups have diverse opinions and beliefs about the afterlife, right? If you talk with a Hindu priest, he's going to explain that after death, there are a pantheon of gods, and you're going to go to different planets and visit different gods. This is what they believe. But if you ask a Muslim cleric, they will explain that Muhammad, the prophet, will be in heaven that you'll go to, paradise. But if you talk with a Jewish rabbi, he will explain the Abrahamic concept of God minus Jesus. But then if you talk to a Catholic or a Christian or a Protestant, they will tell you about Christ the Savior, God the Father, the Holy Spirit, and the Catholic will add on to that the Catholic saints. So who is right? If there's one heaven, who has the right answer? And here is where the Archangel Metatron breaks through the confusion to bring clarity. And instead of siding with one religion, in this book, he really speaks about it in generalizations. And his generalizations are very broad and inclusive, so that all of the major religions can read this book and agree that on the topic of death and heaven, their theology really resembles Metatron's explanations. So the fine print that I talked about is that these messages were written for an audience who is Western, a Western audience. Why? Because I'm a Western person, and he was speaking to me. And so they're Western in nature, and they're also extremely simple to understand, no matter what religious background you have. Even if you have no religious background, you can still read this and understand it. Now, having said that, religious pundits will not read this book and 100% agree with what is being said. But generally, on the whole, the concepts presented will sound familiar, okay? If religions can't agree among themselves, meaning that there are different sects in every religion who have doctrinal differences, then why would I expect them to agree with this book? I don't. So it's never going to happen. So my advice to you is to today take the meat and leave the bones. Have you heard that saying? Take the meat and leave the bones. Take away what's helpful to you and leave the rest to divinity to sort out. Okay, so the messages in the book are titled Nothing to Fear. It's from message 17. And message 18 is called Your Life Plan and Karma. And right off the bat, Metatron begins chapter 17 with a discussion about death. And he says, when somebody dies, you grieve. But the truth is you're not grieving for them. And this is what Claudia was saying in the introduction. You're grieving for yourself. You're grieving for your loss, aren't you? He says you can't be grieving the dead because they're not dead. The end. A finite mind can only comprehend a beginning and an end, birth and death. It cannot comprehend eternity. It can comprehend a body, but it cannot comprehend the soul, which will live forever. And he goes on to say, quote, so really, you don't understand who you are until you get to the other side. Now, this is a remarkable statement. I want you to think about it. He says, let me say it again. You don't understand who you are until you get to the other side. I think I know who I am. Right, Claudia? I know the shell of me. I know my height, my weight, my eye color. I know my family, my ancestry, where I come from. I have formed beliefs and preferences along the way in my life, as well as aversions, those things that I don't like. I know my nationality and I know my personality. And all these factors taken together, I call me. So I've developed a concept over time, an image in my mind of who I am. But Metatron throws that out the window. And he says, you think you know who you are, but you are mistaken. That's only your concept, your ideas. He's saying it's only what your mind made up about you. And he says at death, just like a deep-sea diver must come up for air, they can't stay underwater indefinitely because their oxygen will run out at some point. He says, quote, so at death, you will break through into the next realm and breathe freely again. And the purpose of living, to realize that none of it is real. So he's telling us that the person we understand ourselves to be is not correct. Not only that, but that, quote, everything you see, hear, feel, speak, touch, and taste is unreality. So let's pump the brakes here for just a minute and reflect on this statement. Because if what he is telling us is true, if we don't know our true selves, then that's an incredible statement. And I just want to stop and ask, Claudia, as you're listening to this, is this something that you've ever heard before, what he's saying about that we don't know who we really are? Is this something you've ever heard about before or reflected on before?
Yeah, I have in maybe in different words, but I have come to a point where thinking about myself and what life is, what you do and what you don't, what you believe and what you don't believe, I have come to a point where nothing makes sense. Like it's like, and there's many of my questions are unanswered because there is no answer that can really open to those realms that is the unknown. It's like I just don't know, and I cannot explain you, and I cannot. There are nowhere that I can look for those answers because no one knows.
Right, and you said something really, I think, important. There is that not only do you have answers or do you have questions that doesn't seem to be any answers for, but you said something else about, rewind to what you said. You made a statement in there that I thought was really good. I can't remember now what you said, but it's true.
That it doesn't make sense, right? That doesn't make sense.
What you said. Yes, that's what you said. Yeah, it just hit me again. Yeah, that nothing makes sense in this world. And it's so true, Claudia. That's such a true statement. So if things don't make sense, if we can't get our questions answered in this world, I mean, then what's the point, right? If we're just actors on a stage and this play isn't the real thing, then what's the point? And here's his answer. He says, quote, "You are gods and goddesses in disguise in a very elaborately designed scene called Earth. And there are many more sets and scenes in other dimensions, telling us not only is this a play of God's imagining, of God's imagination, but you are acting in that play. And after death, there are countless other dimensions to take part in, other plays, other scenes. And the point of it all, he says, the point is to remember or reclaim your divinity. To reclaim your divinity. Now, that's a big statement. And, you know, I was thinking about the avatars from the different religions, and if any avatar has ever really explained this, and the first thing that came to mind as I was thinking of it this morning was something Jesus said. You know, Jesus told parables to explain, and it kept popping in my mind. And he told a story known as the parable of the prodigal son. Have you ever heard that story, Claudia? Heard about it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So one of the most well-known biblical parables. But let me tell it in case our listeners don't know it. So if I'm not wrong, I think this is in Luke, and he is telling this story to, Jesus is telling the story to a group of religious leaders, okay? And what the religious leaders are objecting to, they're objecting to him consorting with sinners. They're saying, you call yourself a divine teacher, yet you are allowing prostitutes and tax collectors, which back then was terrible because they stole money, and tax collectors and all the riffraff of society to stay with you, calling them disciples. This is what they're telling him. He says, they say, you ought to do what we do. If you want to be a bigwig, you know, a Jewish bigwig, be above the sinners. Don't lower yourself. That's what they're telling him. And Jesus tells them the story of a son, of a rich landowner who leaves home and goes to the city. And he spends all of his money, his inheritance, until he's destitute. And he becomes homeless. And he finds himself so low that he's actually eating out of a pig's trough because he's starving. And while he's eating the pig slop, he wakes up and he realizes, what am I doing? Why am I homeless and hungry when I've got a rich father who will help me? And he realizes that he's tried it on his own, and life is a lot more, I guess, tough than he bargained for. So he goes home, this wayward son. And it's a very touching ending because the father sees the son, it says, coming, in the distance from far. And Christ said the father runs to meet him, runs to welcome him. And this is the son who basically demanded his inheritance and left home and said, I'm never coming back. But the father sees him from a distance and runs to welcome him, and he dresses him with the finest clothes, and he gets his servants to prepare a feast for his hungry son. And certainly this parable was told to the religious leaders to teach them compassion and to teach them about non-judgment. But most, if not all, of Christ's teachings had more than one meaning. I mean, there was the obvious meaning for those, but for those who can look deeper, there's a hidden meaning here in his story. So when we look deeper at this story, we can see that it is also a description of birth, death, and the afterlife. Now let me explain this. At birth, we leave the palace of the rich father, meaning heaven. And we take everything we have, the riches we have, and the riches we have is what? It's the soul. It's the soul. It's us. It's the soul. And we come to earth, the big city, find our fortunes, just like the wayward son. And because this planet can grind us down, right? Nothing makes sense. Our questions aren't being answered. We can find ourselves out of answers, lacking in knowledge, ignorant about who we really are and what we're supposed to be doing here. Ignorance is the pig slop. And when we get fed up with a spiritual ignorance, we will be drawn back to our Father and His riches. We're drawn to seek spiritual answers instead of trying to meet our needs through worldly methods, through consumerism and relationships. Those are the worldly methods. And we will go home again. And what will our Father do? How will He receive us? He ran to help and welcome His child. So it's very touching. And so you can see Christ taught that the point of it all is remembering who you are, that you are the son or daughter of the greatest king, and the point is to remember who you are and where you came from. Are you just a lost, miserable, and broke human, or are you so much more? This is what Metatron means when he says, only when you return to the other side will you see yourself as you really are. You will see yourself as God sees you. So, Claudia, I wonder if you have any thoughts that you'd like to share here.
Well, yeah, it's funny because when you hear those, I hear you, and this is not something new. And when you are in body, even though it sounds very logical and beautiful, and yeah, God is gonna embrace us back whenever we go back. When you're in body, there's always the doubting mind saying, really? Is it really? It's like your evidence with your eyes is that whoever you have has gone to the other side, it was poof, and they disappeared. And you don't have the proof of all that has been said, and then doubt creeps in you, right? Yes.
It's like what is being said spiritually to us from a spiritual perspective doesn't make sense to a logical mind that's looking at the quote-unquote proof that we're seeing, right? Like it doesn't line up. Yeah, absolutely. And so Metatron goes on to describe death as, he says it's like leaving a costume party. He says, quote, remember, the dead have not left the party. They've only stepped out of their costumes. You are the ones who are left at the party, right? And that's where we're at. That's exactly what you're saying. We're left here. We're left behind. And we've got on these temporary masks. And when the masks have served their purpose, then we'll leave them behind, which is the body. And we'll wake up one day as we die, as if we're being born, as if it was our birthday, not our death day. And on that lucky day, that we will see that the sadness and grief and loss and fear that we experienced on earth all served a purpose. And what is that purpose? The purpose is our soul's evolution, Claudia, our transformation, our spiritual transformation, our moral transformation. I saw a bumper sticker one time that sums up the purpose of life in 2 words. 2 words. Here's what it said. On the back of a bumper sticker, it said, evolve, damn it. That's it. That's life in 2 words. We're here to evolve. And Metatron doesn't use those exact words, but he does say this, quote, changing yourself is the greatest achievement. It is more important than changing others. And he says the pinnacle of evolution, the best that you can do, the highest state you can reach, the pinnacle of evolution is the willingness to change yourself, to see your own faults, mistakes, shortcomings, and errors, and to change them. He doesn't say it's to give to others. He says it's to change yourself. You want to know the purpose of all our trials and tribulations? He just told you. But we, and I'm including myself in this, we humans don't like looking at our faults. We don't want to contemplate our past mistakes. So we make excuses. We justify. We blame. Oh boy, do we blame. Because looking at ourselves is painful and it requires that we change. And most humans don't do change very well. We do better with sameness. I was thinking about this. I was a psychotherapist for 17 years, and it would always surprise me when my clients would rather stay in an abusive situation than create a new life. Boggles my mind. But I did the same thing. I stayed in a dysfunctional relationship for a decade rather than leave and turn my life upside down. Change is scary because we don't know what's on the other side. It's like I'd rather stay here even though it's unhealthy because at least it's predictable. At least I know what to expect. So we stay locked in these unhealthy, dysfunctional, even abusive jobs or relationships rather than risk the unknown. And what Metatron is trying to show us is that to change ourselves is the greatest thing in a marriage. That's not the pinnacle. The pinnacle of life is not to build a dynasty or to have millions of dollars in our bank account or even to raise a family or even to help the less fortunate. Metatron seems to be saying that these things are all easier than personal change. So, Claudia, what's your opinion? Why is changing ourselves so hard? Any thoughts?
I think you just said it. There are so many distractors that are very appealing. Like everything outside it seems to be better than anything inside. And I think also you said it. Sometimes when you look back in, we don't like what we see, because and probably many times it's because we compare what we have inside with something that is a mirage, something that is unrealistic or unreal, or and you were talking about that we have a lot of judgment, but judgment, self-judgment is really pivotal for everyone.
Yeah, you know what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm hearing you say that part of why it's difficult to get focused on ourselves instead of other people is personal change. It's because it's really painful to look at what's really there. And so it is easier, I think, to look outward than it is to look inward a lot of times. Metatron puts it like this. He's very comforting, and I find this book to be very comforting. He says it like this, quote, leaving the safe and the guarantee, that which feels secure is anxiety producing for the mind. You must be willing, though, to let go of the shore and set sail on an unknown voyage to find inner peace. You must mostly forget who you are. And he says, you will mostly forget who you are by coming to Earth, what you're doing here, where you came from, and where you're going. And he's saying we're basically wandering around lost most of the time. Now that we know that we are hopelessly lost and that we do not know who we really are, it's time for some good news here. Yes, there is good news ahead. In the next message, message 18, Metatron gives us hope by reminding us of our divine origins. And he says, quote, don't you see, you are a divine being, part human but part divine, part flesh but part spirit. You are a hybrid, if ever there was one. And he says, because we have divine origins, because we are spiritual royalty, that we will feel that we don't belong here. Isn't that interesting? We'll feel that we don't fit in because our soul is remembering its origins. And I know there have been so many times when I felt like, did I get off the bus at the wrong stop? I mean, is this the right planet? Am I supposed to be here? And we will also long for more, he says. The runaway son eating the pig slop realized that he didn't deserve to suffer. He knew that he was the son of a rich man, but he kind of had to experience a discontentment with the world. And this is how he explains it. Quote, once your soul left the upper realms of consciousness, it entered a body of great density that slowed you down. So in other words, our vibrational rate was much higher in heaven than it was here. Then you were born into a world that is trillions of light years from its source, trillions. A dark, cold, lonely world by comparison. And all this has been so disorienting, confusing, and frightening that you would at times like to curl into a ball and stay sequestered where the world's darkness cannot touch you. It's all very understandable, this wanting to hide. Wow. So it sounds like he really does understand how it feels to be human, because the Archangel Metatron was human. That's true. Let me explain that. He was known as Enoch, and he was the great-grandfather of Noah in the Bible. This is who Metatron is. The Bible says this, that he lived a very long life. I think it was like 700 and something years. And before Enoch could die, he was taken to heaven, perhaps in a spaceship. We don't know that, but we know when he got to the heavenly realms that he was given the title of Archangel and the name of Metatron. So he actually was on Earth as a human for a long time. So message 18 is really a breath of fresh air because he speaks to us so compassionately. And in this message, he goes on to explain karma, which is a big subject. That could be a whole show in itself, Claudia. So we're going to skip forward past that, and I'll read to you his admonition to us to keep on keeping on. When you return home, you will be astonished at how close you came in a single lifetime to accomplishing a life's mission. Or you may be one of the fortunate who accomplished their life's mission during this incarnation and don't need to repeat it. Wouldn't it be glorious to graduate and not have to repeat this difficult class? Yes, wouldn't it be? So he says for those souls who don't have to reincarnate again, quote, heaven throws a party in your honor. And believe me when I tell you, this is him speaking, on that day you will be heaven's hero. But for now, like a plane on autopilot, your course is set, so you might as well enjoy the ride. So Claudia, are you enjoying the ride?
Oh my God. I think I want to say that most of the time I do, but of course there are some instances in where you just are like, oh my, this can't be like this. Things should be easier. But yeah, most of it I do like life, but that's a loaded question, Nina.
It is. You know, I would say if somebody asked me that, I would say depending on the day. Sometimes I do, and I've got the wind blowing through my hair and a smile and a bug in my teeth. And other days I'm just miserable. So it just really depends on the day. So at the beginning of this broadcast, I told you that there would not be any specific religious viewpoint on the afterlife that I'd present. But that's because our understanding of the afterlife is informed by religious doctrine. And there are many different religious doctrines, right, that will give you their version. The Christian, Catholic, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, Jewish, those are the main religions. But one other perspective about the afterlife that I believe we need to really hear. Claudia, can you venture a guess as to what perspective that might be?
I would think the scientific.
Ding, ding, ding. That's right. Good guess. The viewpoint I'd like to present is on the subject of the afterlife is not any religious perspective because they all base their doctrines and faith offers its own perspective on what happens after we die. And I'd like to include those facts today. Then you can decide what to believe, what could be seen or what is not seen. So what's the latest science on death after life? And the traditional answer from scientists, if you ask most scientists, is that life after death is impossible. That's what they're going to tell you. Why? Because we cannot prove it. We cannot use the scientific method that calls for proof positive. And if we cannot prove it, then it doesn't exist. Okay? But I say to you, that is an impossibly limited way to think about the universe. Because in 1899, Mr. Charles Dewey was the commissioner of the U.S. Patent Office. Now, the Patent Office authorizes inventions, right? And in 1899, the head of the government's Patent Office officially declared this, quote, everything that can be invented has been invented, unquote. So we'll see about that, Mr. Dewey, because in 1879, 20 years before this astonishing declaration, Thomas Edison was inventing the light bulb, and the commissioner was so blown away by that technology, the light bulb, something we consider ridiculously simple today, that his conclusion was, that's it, mankind has reached the pinnacle of technology. And while I'm poking fun at the short-sighted commissioner, in 1899, I'm sure that everyone would have agreed with him. Because for that time, the light bulb, it must have seemed like magic. I mean, this story from history reminds us that because we cannot see it, because we cannot imagine it, does not mean it cannot happen. Even the best scientists have been proven wrong in the march of time as new technologies are developed. What is science's latest opinion of life after death? And of all the sciences, we look to the newest branch of science, the most progressive. And what do you think that is, Claudia? Take another guess. What branch of science is the newest and most progressive, do you think?
Oh, I would say, I don't know if there's the quantum physics.
That's right. Very good.
Right, yay!
That's right. I need to be giving out prizes here. But first, that's right, quantum physics. But first, let's see what researchers of near-death experiences have to say, okay? And then we'll jump back to quantum physics. And near-death experiences are experiences that have been reported when the heart has stopped and the person is clinically dead. There was a research study in 2014 of 2,060 cardiac arrest survivors. So 2,060 people in hospitals clinically dead. Their heart's dead for more than 4 minutes. Of these, 46% of experiences reported memories after being technically dead. They reported a variety of experiences, which included seeing a bright light. And these are common things: seeing a bright light, feeling that they're outside of one's body, viewing the doctors and nurses or people at the scene of the accident remotely, and meaning as if they were watching from above. And they reported passing through a tunnel and going to a beautiful place, seeing relatives, welcoming them, and having a life review. So these are all commonly reported near-death experiences, or NDEs. Okay, 46% of those 2,060 cardiac arrest survivors had this experience. Now let's look at another study. This is going to blow you away. It did me. Another study by German psychologists and medical doctors, physicians, in Berlin at a research university, Germany, also claim to have proven that thoughts, cognition, thoughts, goes on after death. Now, this is a research university who conducted a study that psychologists and medical doctors performed. Okay? They induced a near-death experience, medically supervised, that allowed the patients to be clinically dead 20 minutes or longer before they were resuscitated. This is a true story, Claudia. This really happened. These findings were reported in 2020, and this controversial experiment was reported on 944 volunteers over a period of 4 years. Nearly 1,000 people. Okay? The most commonly reported memories included feelings of detachment from the body, feelings of levitating or rising above the body, total serenity, security, warmth, and again, detachment of the body. So this is an incredible study that was done. There's other evidence here that I like to present, medical evidence, okay? So those are two studies right there that, to me, say a lot, okay? Not only because they were conducted by a large survey, so a lot of people in the study, but also they were conducted by medical doctors and psychologists. Here's something else to consider. Another type of evidence that shows something special happens at the time of death that involves a change in weight. So how much a person weighs. So in a series of medical experiments, people who were very close to dying were placed on a bed that had scales that could measure their weight to very small increments. And as the moment of death occurred, normally what happens is that a body doesn't begin to lose weight until after death, when it'll begin to evaporate, okay, the fluids gradually. But in this study, when the heart stopped, 5 different physicians agreed and, wrote down their John Hancock and testified that after taking measurements, once the heart had stopped, there was a sudden, not gradual, but sudden loss of weight that was about a half of an ounce to 1 ounce. And the loss couldn't be explained by any physical force. So there was no explanation for it. And when I read that, I thought, wow, could it be that this sudden loss in weight is the soul leaving the body? It's such a small amount of weight, but it happens in every case. Could not be accounted for. And I thought that was a very interesting study. Doctors will explain near-death experiences and hospice patients who see their relatives or angels near or at the time of death as hallucinations of the dying. That's what they'll tell you. But hospice doctors, and especially hospice nurses who are in the room at the time of death, report that these people become cognitively alert and aware just before they cross over. Even dementia patients who will frequently seem to wake up and come back just prior to death. And nothing can explain it. In other words, this person had such bad dementia that they didn't know where they were for a long period of time. And suddenly it's like they wake up and they're their old selves again. And hospice doctors will tell you that hallucinatory patients are patients who are seeing things other than what the dying see, which are uniformly, people who are dying are seeing things that are on the other side, like relatives that have passed on and angels they see a lot. So hospice workers report that their patients are having visions at the time of death, not hallucinating, that these are two different things that are happening. And lastly, I'll just present this one more piece of evidence for our consideration. There's another story that to mind right now here about a hospice physician who is very famous because she wrote an enormously popular book on hospice care called On Death and Dying. And you might not know her name, Claudia, but her name is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I don't know if you've heard that name. She's the doctor who brought hospice care to the United States. She's a German doctor. And she tells about an encounter in one of her books that I read that she had with a patient who had already died. Okay, so this is a highly respected doctor who concluded that the visions of the dying were not hallucinatory, but real. And this is the conclusion medically that she came to. But she talks about a day where she had been lecturing, on death and dying at the University of Chicago. And it had not been going well for some reason, and she was feeling really down in the dumps and probably feeling like maybe these Americans are not going to get what I'm saying. And she was walking down the hallway feeling like perhaps the medical establishment was not going to embrace this concept of life after death that she was trying to bring. And she was in the hallway, and a woman stopped Dr. Ross and asked she said, Dr. Ross, is there someplace we could talk for just a moment? I need to say something to you. And she was a little bit taken back, but said, well, sure, I guess. And so she found an office that wasn't being used. And Dr. Ross took her into the office, and the woman says to her, Dr. Ross, no matter what happens, you need to continue your work because it's important. Many people's lives are going to be changed if you discontinue your work. You must continue this work. And as this woman was talking, she realizes that it was one of her hospice patients who had died. And she was so taken back that it was like she couldn't find any words because she realizes she's talking to a hospice patient who had died. And she asked the woman if she would please write down her name and sign her autograph. And the woman did. Sure, she wrote it down. And then they left the office. And as Dr. Ross walked the office and turned around in the hallway, stepped into the hallway, she was gone. Now, this story is going to sound made up, except that why would a doctor who is trying to establish herself in the United States and introduce a program of palliative care, say such a thing, unless it was true, unless it had really happened. Because this is a highly trained, exceptionally scholarly physician who is not going to risk her career, right? Not going to risk her chance at a career by making up stories. So there are literally thousands of near-death experiences, stories like this, like I've just told you, about what happens when we die, what happens when we go to the other side, and even stories about the dead coming back and making contact. And I have a story of my own about that. So, Claudia, do you believe in life after death? And if so, why?
I do. Well, in my mind, my logical mind, it makes sense that there's something else. Otherwise, it would be one of the nonsense, the major nonsense of life if there wasn't. But I have not had an NDE experience, or in this doing what I do with CView, I have been in contact with many people like you, Nina, and others that have had NDE in near-death experiences, and I just cannot not hear you and believe it's true, because all of you are doing this work of helping others, and you don't have anything to gain. On the contrary.
Right. Right. Like Dr. Ross, I mean, here she is, trying to establish herself in her practice and her methods of palliative care here in the United States. Why on earth would she, risk her career? It doesn't make sense, right? So it is interesting to note, though, that I want to throw this in there, that many of the patients that we talked about, remember in the study that we talked about of 950 patients who died and then were dead for 20 minutes or longer, and then they
I would not do that,
them.
by the way. I would not participate. No way.
But I wonder if those patients were terminally ill or something like that. I mean, I would think most of them would have to be. But what I want to say about that, and I forgot to tell you, it's interesting to note that many of the patients were atheists. They had no religious beliefs at all. The head physician of this German study said this, quote, "I know our results could disturb the beliefs of many people," Dr. Ackerman said, "but in a way, we have just answered one of the greatest questions in the history of mankind. Yes, there is life after death, and it looks like this applies to everyone." So they can say it applies to everyone because Christians, Hindus, Jews, Muslims, and atheists were patients. Isn't that interesting? So it doesn't seem to be that an atheist goes one direction and a Christian goes another. It doesn't work like that. All of them had the similar experiences of going towards the light, of feeling peace, overwhelming peace, of a life review. So it's interesting because even the atheists came back and told the same story. So any other comments or questions, Claudia?
Well, I like these messages from Metatron. I like that he dwells into that. And I don't know you, but it's like once you read this chapter, you want to know more. It's like, okay, it's like he's giving us a little taste of something, but it's like the idea of, okay, so give me more. Let me know all the details. What am I missing? So that's what I feel with this.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. that is exactly what he's doing. Most of this book feels like a teaser. I mean, he says a lot of worthy things in this book, but he doesn't go in depth. He skips over a lot of different subjects. He covers a lot of different subjects in the book. And so he really doesn't go in depth about very many of them, and this is one that he just touches on. But I would suggest, if you're interested in this subject, finding out what goes on at death with our brains and with our spirits, and then what we see and what we experience, is look into near-death experiences. Go on Google and just Google it. There are hundreds of books on near-death experiences. I've read about, maybe about six books, I think, on it. One I remember that I really liked was by Dr. Moody, and I forget what his book is named, but his was really good. He's actually a physician, a well-respected physician, and he writes on near-death experiences of his patients. There was one lady who is also a physician. I bought her book, and she's talking in her book specifically about what she calls less than positive near-death experiences. So these are near-death experiences that people had that when they come back to tell about them, they were less than positive. And these are people who did not live exemplary lives, okay? And they had a lot of regret at their death. And when they came back, they had a story to tell about going and experiencing the suffering, okay, and the wrongs that they caused during lifetime. And some of it was scary for them, very scary. Some of it was they felt grieved and so sorry about what they'd done because they were shown how it impacted people. So there's actually a book, Barbara, I think is her first name. She's a doctor, but look up, all you have to do is Google less than positive near experiences, and you'll get to read those. Those are very interesting. The one common factor among those stories, she didn't say that these people didn't believe they went to hell per se, but they believed they were sent to dimensions in which they got to see what suffering they had caused. Interesting. And so, and it was hellish at times to watch. So definitely those are interesting things. But the one common thread among them all was at a certain point, each of these people realized they had been going the wrong way in life. They had been doing things that weren't helpful for them, weren't healthy for them, and weren't helpful and healthy for other people. And they wanted to turn around and go the other direction. And it's interesting because each of them called out for help during that experience. Each one said, please help me. I am so sorry. I will turn over a new leaf. I will be a new person. And each time that they did that, they were rescued out of that situation, which is interesting. And usually they described an angel, something that looked like an angel rescuing them out of those situations. Sometimes they saw the figure of Jesus rescuing them. Some people actually they felt God rescuing them. But in all cases, they came back to say that it changed their life dramatically. Like their lives were dramatically changed after that experience. Have you heard about those, Claudia?
Yeah, I have heard about those, and I did read Dr. Moody's book, Life After Life, and it's really reassuring. And, because even if you are very wrong, there's always something or someone there to rescue you. So, and I sure hope, Nina, that if I'm that wrong or if I can change, that my angels or my soul, whatever it is that rescue you, will rescue me as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't believe the theology that says once stuck, always stuck, or, once damned, always damned. I just don't believe that because I believe in a loving God, And I know if someone called out to me for help and they really wanted to change, I would help them. And I know that God is much more loving than I. So I just have to believe that that's the truth. So, yes. So this has been an enlightening episode. I hope that our listeners have enjoyed it, and that you'll join us the next time. Going to be Friday, July 21st at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time for our next podcast study group. And we'll be discussing practical spirituality. Practical spirituality. How do I be a spiritual person and in this world and have a good effect in my environment? So that's what we'll be talking about next time. If you'd like to learn more about the book we're studying, Messages from Metatron, please go to Amazon.com and search for Nina Bingham, or you can visit my blog at ninabingham.blogspot.com. So thank you to my wonderful co-host, Claudia Pareco, to my talented co-host. And,
thank you.
To the audience, thank you. And to my audience, remember that there is more to life than what you can see. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, and everybody have a good weekend.